Lethia's gaze slid to him, her expression unreadable. Command would see an opportunity. A place to exploit. Alex couldn't deny it. If Earth forces learned of Kairos, it wouldn't be a symbol of unity, it would be a target. For a moment, the weight of his mission, of his own role in this conflict, pressed on him. The question burned: could he still trust his own people to do the right thing? Lethia watched him carefully, her eyes a mix of caution and curiosity. She wasn't just guiding him now, she was assessing him, measuring the depth of his convictions. Kairos isn't safe, Lethia's tone sharpened, a warning laced with experience. Outsiders draw trouble. Her tail flicked behind her, a restless motion that betrayed her own unease. Alex caught the undercurrent in her voice. The glimmering, chaotic sprawl ahead wasn't just a neutral ground, it was a powder keg. A place where desperate deals were struck, where law was an abstract idea, barely enforced. If there were others like Lethia, touched by ascension, fighting instincts clawing at their reason, Kairos could be a crucible. "Stay near me," Lethia added, stepping closer, the warmth of her presence a stark contrast to the cool air. Her voice dropped lower. "I'll keep you alive." The promise landed heavily between them. In a place like Kairos, survival wasn't a guarantee, it was a favor, a pledge that demanded trust. And maybe more. Alex's eyes lingered on her, the sharp lines of her face, the glint of her scales catching fractured sunlight. The realization hit him with a jolt: he wasn't just relying on her for guidance. He was trusting her with his life. And that trust felt more vulnerable, more exposed, than any battlefield wound. "Thanks," he managed, the word rough in his throat. Lethia's gaze softened, just a fraction, but enough for Alex to notice. The air between them buzzed with a tension that was both protective and charged, a shield and a blade. "Protection comes with expectations," Lethia teased, the playful glint in her eyes cutting through the weight of their steps. Her voice slipped into something more primal, almost a purr. "Ascension's peaking. My instincts, they're loud." Alex's heartbeat quickened. He'd seen those instincts flare before, when her pupils narrowed to slits, when her posture tightened like a predator ready to strike. The veneer of control she wore so carefully was fracturing, the raw intensity of ascension pressing against the boundaries of reason. "What's that mean for me?" he asked, half joking, but his voice carried a tremor of curiosity. Of uncertainty. Lethia's grin was wild, sharp as a blade. "You'll see." It was a promise and a threat, a promise of things unspoken and boundaries crossed. The tension between them coiled tighter, a live wire crackling with electricity. She stepped closer, her gaze locked on his, intense, unyielding. Her breath brushed his cheek, warm and charged, and in that moment, Alex wasn't sure if she would kiss him or tear him apart. The line between danger and desire blurred, their shared path narrowing to a single, precarious thread. Whatever awaited them in Kairos, it was only a backdrop to the tempest brewing between them, a storm that could break them or bind them. "It's not just biology," Lethia's voice softened, her eyes searching his face. Her usual guarded sharpness had dulled, replaced by something more vulnerable, something real. "I choose this us. You fascinate me." Alex's heart skipped. The raw honesty in her words, stripped of her usual armor, caught him off guard. Theirs had always been a bond tangled in necessity and survival, a reluctant partnership forged in the fires of war. But now, in this quiet, unguarded moment, it felt like something more. "Yeah, well," he chuckled softly, his voice a bit unsteady. "You're not exactly boring yourself." Lethia's lips curved, a half-smile that hinted at the predator beneath but also something softer. The weight of their shared experiences, the bruises and scars, felt like more than just baggage. They were threads that tied them together. For the first time since landing on Nexus 9, Alex wondered if there could be more to his mission than just duty. Maybe, just maybe, there was a future here that didn't revolve around orders and bloodshed. A future where they weren't just human and Aurelian, soldier and alien, but simply Alex and Lethia. Alex, she murmured, his name rolling off her tongue with a careful deliberation. It was a sound stripped of caution, a sound that felt like an unspoken promise. He looked at her, the name echoing between them, its weight heavier than he expected. They'd crossed lines, blurred boundaries, but this felt different. Intimate. Permanent. I'm drawn to you, too, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ascension didn't make that up. Lethia shook her head slowly, the movement graceful, almost regretful. No. It amplifies what's real. The air thickened with understanding. Ascension was a catalyst, not a fabrication. It brought out the truth buried beneath their surfaces, desires that lingered in the spaces between their defenses. Alex's gaze drifted to her clawed hand, resting inches from his own. There was a hesitation there, a barrier still unbroken. Her scales caught the fractured light, a shimmer of something both alien and beautiful. He wondered if she saw him the same way, a creature of contradictions, flawed and fierce. Without thinking, his fingers brushed hers. Not a bold, reckless touch, just a small, fragile connection. Lethia's eyes flicked to their hands, then back to his face. Her silence spoke louder than any declaration. The haze finally broke, revealing Kairos sprawled before them, a chaotic web of domed structures and bustling, intertwining streets. Alex's breath caught in his throat. The city pulsed with life, vibrant and wild. Insectoid traders with clicking mandibles haggled over crates of glittering minerals. Hulking reptilians, scaled and massive, shouldered heavy loads, their guttural growls blending with the marketplace noise. Tall, avian beings with iridescent feathers wove gracefully through the crowds, their melodic trills adding a haunting undertone to the din. It's a damn zoo, Alex muttered, his eyes wide. Lethia chuckled beside him, a genuine, unguarded laugh. A marketplace. Credits talk louder than claws here. Alex took it all in, the mess of languages, the clash of cultures, the energy that buzzed like electricity in the air. This wasn't just a trading post. It was a crucible where species collided, where tension simmered beneath fragile truces. Stay close, Lethia said, her voice cutting through the chaos. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the crowd, alert for threats. Not everyone here respects the peace. Alex nodded, instinctively edging closer to her. The weight of the emergency beacon at his hip felt heavier now. This was a powder keg disguised as a marketplace, an opportunity and a threat in equal measure. Lethia's hand brushed his arm, steady, grounding. Keep your guard up, but don't look like prey. Kairos can smell fear. Alex swallowed, forcing himself to stand taller, his eyes forward. The mission felt more fragile now, a delicate thread pulled taut by the clashing cultures around them. But beside him, Lethia stood solid, a fortress of confidence. Whatever awaited them in Kairos, they would face it together. They approached a massive archway carved from dark, weathered stone, its surface etched with alien runes that pulsed faintly in hues of green and violet. The symbol seemed to hum, a vibration Alex felt in his bones. 2 Aurelian guards flanked the entrance, their eyes like polished onyx, narrowing sharply as they caught his scent. The air grew taut, predatory. Before either guard could step forward, Lethia moved, her stride unyielding, her presence commanding. Her voice cut through the tension, sharp and certain. "He's mine," she declared, each word a weighted, undeniable truth. The guard's mandibles clicked, a language of suspicion and deference. Their slitted pupils lingered on Alex, measuring, judging. The weight of their stares pressed down on him, primal and ancient, a reminder that in this place, he was unmistakably prey. But they stepped aside, their defiance tempered by Lethia's authority. The threat that hung in the air thinned but did not vanish. Alex released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Friendly neighbors," he muttered under his breath. Lethia glanced at him, a glimmer of amusement in her eyes. "Respect is earned here. You're fortunate they chose to listen." Her words were a reminder. Without her, this place would devour him without a second thought. The trust he placed in her felt heavier, deeper, more dangerous. "Mine," Alex echoed, his voice a mix of curiosity and unease. He arched a brow, the teasing edge of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Lethia's smirk matched his, sharp and knowing. "In our culture, a bite can claim. My venom marked you." A rush of heat shot through Alex's veins, a mixture of alarm and an undeniable thrill. The memory of that moment, her fangs in his skin, the sting of her venom flashed through his mind, visceral and raw. "So I'm, what?" he stammered, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "Your property." Lethia's laugh was low, a sound that curled like smoke and lingered. "My partner. If you'll have it." The gravity of her words settled between them, a fragile balance of humor and sincerity. Partner. Not a subordinate, not a pet, a partner. The implications of it buzzed in Alex's mind, cutting through the chaos of Kairos. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a choice. Her choice and his. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think I can handle that." For a heartbeat, the noise of the marketplace receded, the chaos of Kairos blurred into the background. In that space, they stood on equal ground, two beings caught in the web of conflict and consequence, but bound by something neither of them fully understood. The inn was a cacophony of sights, sounds, and scents, an intersection of alien cultures thrown together under a domed ceiling that looked like the inside of a seashell, iridescent and glimmering. Tables crafted from scavenged starship metal sat unevenly on a cracked stone floor. Creatures of all shapes and sizes huddled together, some haggling, some drinking, others engaged in hushed, heated debates. A wiry, four-eyed innkeeper greeted them with a fluid bow, his silvered skin reflecting the dim, shifting lights. His upper set of eyes stayed locked on Lethia, while the lower pair sized up Alex with calculated curiosity. "Room," the innkeeper rasped, his voice like gravel. Lethia nodded, her presence as steady and assured as ever. The innkeeper led them through the crowded common room, past a group of armored reptilians whose scales glimmered like liquid gold. Their eyes followed Alex, assessing, weighing a predator's gaze. Alex's instincts sharpened. His gaze flicked over every corner, cataloging exits, potential threats, anything that could be turned into a weapon. Years of military training thrummed beneath his skin, a survival reflex that refused to dull. Lethia remained close, a silent shield. The others sensed it, the unspoken claim she had made, the line drawn in the sand. Most looked away, wary of a fight they weren't prepared to start. Their room was modest, a narrow space with a cot of woven fibers and a low table marked with rings from countless drinking vessels. The walls were etched with more of the alien runes, their meanings unreadable but strangely comforting. Lethia closed the door behind them, the noise of the inn muffled to a dull hum. For a moment, it felt like a sanctuary, a place caught between the chaos of Kairos and the uncertain road ahead. Alex leaned back against the wall, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Lethia watched him, a curious blend of amusement and understanding. "Busy place," he muttered. Her smirk returned. "Kairos is a crossroads, 1,000 paths meeting in one tangled knot." "Perfect place to get lost," Alex replied, his tone light but edged with the weight of everything unsaid. "Or to find something worth fighting for," Lethia countered, her gaze steady. The silence that followed wasn't awkward but charged alive with the weight of decisions yet to be made. Their room sat at the topmost floor of the inn, a quiet perch that seemed worlds away from the chaos below. From the window, they could see the tangled sprawl of Kairos, a maze of neon-lit streets winding beneath the dome's shimmering surface. The noises of the city hummed softly, distant and muted. Lethia stood beside him, her reflection blending with his in the glass. Her eyes glimmered softly in the ambient light, catching fragments of color that danced from the cityscape below. Without warning, her clawed hand reached out, tracing the line of his jaw. The touch was gentle yet deliberate, a sensation that lingered, both alien and oddly familiar. Her gaze followed the motion, curiosity, and something deeper flaring within her. "You trust me," she said, her voice quiet, almost disbelieving. Alex's breath hitched slightly, but he didn't pull away. He met her eyes, the amber depths of them vivid and searching. "Yeah," he murmured, his voice steady. "Guess I do." In that moment, it wasn't just a statement, it was an acceptance. An acknowledgement of the blurred lines between ally and adversary, between desire and danger. The air between them thickened, charged with the unspoken weight of everything they'd survived together and everything yet to come. Alex's eyes drifted back to the window, to the view of Kairos pulsing with life. The streets below twisted like veins carrying a diverse, restless flow of creatures from across the galaxy. It was a city that felt both alive and on edge, a convergence of the unpredictable. "You're always scanning," Lethia noted, amusement threading through her tone. She leaned against the window frame, her arms crossed, watching him watch the world. He smirked, a touch of humor breaking through. "Old habits. Keeps me alive." Her presence brushed against his shoulder, warmth and proximity, a closeness that felt earned rather than given. They were a team now, forged through shared survival and the thin strands of trust they'd woven. The realization settled in his chest like a steadying weight. Lethia's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through the guarded sharpness of her expression. "You're not alone here, you know," she murmured. It wasn't a question, it was a promise. Alex glanced at her, the edges of his guarded resolve softening. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I'm starting to figure that out." Time slipped by, an unmarked stretch of quiet that felt fragile. The room's shadows lengthened as the lights of Kairos brightened, turning the city into a sea of glimmering constellations. Lethia broke the silence, her voice low and edged with restraint. "Ascension's shifting," she said, the words deliberate. "The need's stronger now." Alex turned, catching the intensity in her gaze. The gold of her eyes burned with a hunger that was both primal and deeply personal. The line between instinct and choice blurred, and he could see it in her, see the weight of the conflict raging beneath her calm exterior. "Do you want to finish what we started?" she asked, her voice daring, unflinching. The question hung heavy, charged with consequence. His heart thudded, each beat a reminder of the delicate, dangerous territory they were treading. "You're not making this easy," he admitted, his lips curling into a hesitant, crooked smile. Lethia's smirk was sharp, electric. Since when has anything between us been easy? The room felt smaller closer. The distance between them was a breath, a choice. Alex's hesitation evaporated, replaced by a clarity sharpened by the risks they faced. He stepped forward, closing the gap, and for a moment, there was nothing but the electricity between them, charged, unpredictable, undeniable. Alex leaned against the wall, his arms crossed as he studied Lethia. The room felt smaller, confined by the weight of the question he couldn't ignore any longer. "What are we, Lethia?" he finally asked, his voice steady but edged with uncertainty. It's not normal." She held his gaze, her expression a blend of contemplation and defiance. The golden hue of her eyes seemed to flare, catching the fragmented light from the window. "No," she agreed softly. "It's not." Her voice steadied, a conviction threading through it. "But it's ours. We make the rules." The simplicity of her answer caught Alex off guard, like a quiet revelation. In a universe bound by rules, by orders, alliances, and betrayals, what they had defied definition. It wasn't human, and it wasn't Aurelian. It was them, raw, untamed, and messy. Without overthinking, they leaned into each other, an instinctual, mutual pull. The kiss was unhurried yet intense, a shared acknowledgement of everything unsaid. For a moment, the chaos of the world outside didn't matter. This was theirs, and they would decide what it meant. Their next kiss burned hotter, deep, consuming. The room seemed to tilt, narrowing around them. Lethia's claws, sharp and alien, grazed his back, a slip of instinct meeting skin. A sharp sting cut through the heat, followed by the warmth of blood welling at the thin, precise line. "Oops," Lethia whispered, her tone somewhere between amused and apologetic. Her fingers, still tipped with those predatory claws, traced the wound, a curious, careful touch that both stung and soothed. The contact felt intimate, primal, a reminder of the thin line between danger and desire. Alex winced, then smirked, a rough chuckle breaking the tension. "You're a little sharper than I thought." Lethia's grin was wicked, unapologetic. "You're tougher than you look." "Yeah, well," he quipped, "you're weirder than I thought." Her laughter echoed, bright and unguarded, a sound that felt both alien and achingly familiar. The jagged edges of their differences only sharpened the pull between them. The cut across Alex's back had already sealed a thin, red line where blood no longer flowed. Lethia's fingers hovered over it, her brow furrowed, curiosity replacing mischief. "Your immunity's unreal," she remarked, her voice thoughtful. "Our secretions venom, pheromones that kill most. Or at least paralyze them." Alex shrugged, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Guess I'm inconveniently durable." Lethia chuckled, the sound low and knowing. "Very. Makes things interesting." The implications hung between them, wild, untested, a chemistry that defied logic. Whatever separated them biologically was outweighed by what connected them, a balance of restraint and risk. Alex's grin widened, a glimmer of challenge in his eyes. "I'd say it makes things complicated." Lethia tilted her head, her gaze sharp yet softened by a hint of warmth. "Good thing I like complicated." Their shared smirks felt like a pact, an agreement that this wasn't simple, and maybe it wasn't safe. But it was theirs, and that was enough. Lethia's fingers lingered on Alex's shoulder for a moment longer before she pulled away, her expression sharpening back to the warrior's edge he had first met. The atmosphere in the room shifted, tenderness giving way to purpose. "We've still got a job," she reminded, her voice steady and clear. "The Citadel's next. Expect resistance. Ascension's got everyone on edge." Alex nodded, grounding himself in the mission. The weight of the past days, the revelations, the connection, the chaos settled heavily on his shoulders. But they couldn't afford to lose focus. Not now. Yeah, he replied, the soldier in him reawakening. Let's get it done. They had become something more than allies, an unspoken trust binding them, a shared resolve that went deeper than survival. Yet the mission remained, a storm on the horizon that could either shatter them or solidify their bond. Two threads twisted into one, pulling tighter with each step forward. As they gathered their gear, the silence felt charged like a string drawn tight, ready to snap. Lethia's gaze lingered, her eyes a shade darker, burdened with something unsaid. Finally, she spoke, her voice raw but steady. This it matters to me, she admitted. I'm seeing possibilities I never let myself imagine. Alex stilled, the weight of her words cutting through the noise of preparation. For a moment, he saw past the soldier and the alien, past the layers of guarded strength and uncertainty. He saw her vulnerable, resolute, choosing this despite all the risks. Same here, he replied, his voice firm yet gentle. We're in deep, aren't we? She nodded, a faint smirk breaking the intensity, a flash of the warrior who refused to back down. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was a quiet understanding, a pact that went beyond spoken promises. Trust sealed the space between them, binding tighter than any oath. Outside, the city of Kairos pulsed with its own chaotic rhythm, alien traders haggling, machines whirring, distant voices rising and falling like a foreign symphony. The world continued, indifferent to the choices they made in this small, rented room. Alex took a breath, the weight of what lay ahead heavy but no longer suffocating. He turned to Lethia, meeting her gaze, the golden irises fierce yet steady. I'm with you, he said, the promise carried on a breath, unyielding. Lethia's eyes softened just enough for him to notice, the edges of her guard worn down by trust. The air hung still for a beat, like the world itself was holding its breath. Then, shoulders squared, they stepped out of the room, side by side. Whatever came next, the citadel, the resistance, the unpredictable chaos of a galaxy at war, they would face it together. Not just as allies, but as something more, a bond forged by fire and tempered by choice. The room was quiet, the muted hum of Kairos's nightlife muffled through the walls. Lethia stretched out on the woven mat, her golden eyes half closed, weary yet sharp. Alex lowered himself beside her, his back pressing against the cool wall. The adrenaline of the past days finally ebbed, leaving a dull ache, a weight of unspoken fears and unresolved futures. For a moment, they simply sat there, the silence not awkward but heavy with contemplation. Alex's gaze drifted to the ceiling, following the alien carvings etched into the stone, symbols of a world he was barely beginning to understand. The absurdity of it all hit him, a human soldier and an Aurelian warrior, caught in a web that neither had woven but both were determined to untangle. This started as recon, he muttered, half to himself. A damn recon mission. Lethia's eyes flickered open, a smirk touching her lips. And now? He exhaled slowly. Now. I don't know what the hell this is. But I know it's not going to be the same after. She looked at him for a moment longer, the smirk softening into something deeper, almost reflective. Then she closed her eyes again, the tension in her frame loosening just slightly. Alex leaned back, the weight of exhaustion finally pulling at him. Outside, the world moved on, but for a brief moment, they were suspended, caught between what had been and what was yet to come. A harsh, urgent knock snapped them both to attention. Instinct and training jolted through Alex's system, his hand already reaching for the pistol resting by his side. Lethia was on her feet in a heartbeat, her posture sharp and ready. The innkeeper's raspy voice crackled through the door. "Trouble's brewing. Words out about your human." Alex's jaw tightened. "Damn it." He shot a glance at Lethia, who had already retrieved her weapons, her gaze sharp and alert. Her nostrils flared, a low, guttural growl vibrating in her throat, instinct layered over calculation. "They've found us," she said, voice low. Alex's mind raced. Kairos wasn't safe anymore, not that it ever truly had been. The idea that their presence had stirred enough ripples to reach this level of consequence sank like a stone in his gut. He should have known humans weren't meant to be here, not like this. "Pack light," Lethia urged, her movements swift and practiced. "We need options, and we need them now." Alex nodded, adrenaline swallowing the last remnants of sleep. Whatever fragile piece they had found here had just been shattered. They descended the stairs with measured urgency, the creaking wood beneath their feet betraying their haste. The innkeeper, a wiry figure with 4 sharp eyes, waited at the bottom, his gaze darting nervously to the entrance. "The High Council wants you now," he rasped. "And your UEDF's on the horn, too. You've stirred a hell of a nest." Alex exchanged a quick glance with Lethia. The Council's interest was dangerous enough, but the UEDF? If they were reaching out across the boundaries of the system, things were spiraling faster than he'd feared. "Neutral ground," Alex said firmly. "We meet them both at once. Level the field." Lethia's jaw tightened, her gaze thoughtful before nodding. "The Temple of Convergence. It's sacred, a place where factions respect parley. It's our best shot." The innkeeper's face twisted, skeptical. "You're gambling with blades against your throat, human. Just know that." Alex met the alien's gaze, the weight of his choices settling in. "Blades or not, we need answers." Lethia's hand brushed his shoulder, a silent affirmation. The bond between them, fragile yet defiant, felt like the only constant in a storm of uncertainty. As they stepped out of the inn and into the chaotic sprawl of Kairos, the path ahead seemed clearer yet more treacherous than ever. The Temple of Convergence rose like a monolith, its spires jagged and imposing against the turbulent sky. The architecture was a fusion of cultures, each curve and angle a testament to the treaties and truces etched into the bones of Kairos. Alex's breath caught at the sight, the weight of the moment settling heavy on his shoulders. "Things just got real," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Lethia's hand found his, her grip steady and grounding. "We're not alone anymore. This is bigger than us." Her words hung between them, sharp and undeniable. For a moment, Alex glimpsed the scale of it all, species and factions far beyond his comprehension, forces colliding and coalescing in ways he couldn't control. Whatever happened in that temple could shift the course of an entire galaxy. He wasn't just a soldier anymore, he was a variable, an anomaly standing at the intersection of destiny and disaster. "Ready?" Lethia asked, her gaze unwavering. "Not even a little," Alex admitted, but he stepped forward regardless. The doors of the temple parted, a silent welcome to the storm ahead. Inside, the chamber was a vast, echoing space, illuminated by veins of crystalline energy that pulsed rhythmically through the walls. The air was thick with tension, an electric charge that threatened to snap at any second. The UEDF delegation entered first, Commander Harrington at the front, his face etched with battle-worn lines, eyes sharp and unyielding. Flanking him were soldiers, rigid and disciplined, their weapons holstered but hands itching for action. Alex's heart twisted. Those were his people, the uniform and stance achingly familiar. Yet now, they felt alien, a reminder of a world he'd begun to slip away from. Then came the Aurelians. Led by Varak, a massive figure with scales that rippled like molten silver, each movement a calculated display of power. His eyes glowed with a predatory intelligence, sizing up the humans with a thinly veiled disdain. Behind him, Aurelians of varying sizes and hues stood, their forms elegant and lethal. The room seemed to hold its breath as the two delegations faced each other, enemies bound by a fragile truce. Alex could feel the scrutiny, the suspicion, the unspoken threats curling through the air. Beside him, Lethia's posture remained steady, yet her gaze flickered with intensity. This was her world too, just as divided, just as fractured. Before either side could launch into their accusations, Alex stepped forward. His pulse pounded in his ears, but his voice was steady. "I'm immune," he declared, letting the words ring out. "Venom, pheromones, all of it?" The impact was immediate. Varak's eyes narrowed, a subtle tilt of his head signaling curiosity and skepticism. Harrington's expression hardened, his jaw clenching so tight that Alex swore he heard the grind of teeth. "You've gone rogue, RHS," Harrington bit out, each syllable a condemnation. This wasn't the mission. The words struck hard, an indictment, a reminder of his past allegiances. Alex opened his mouth, but Lethia was faster. "He chose this," she said, her voice a controlled snarl. "We chose each other." Her declaration sliced through the charged air, a bold defiance that left no room for retreat. The weight of it echoed in the silence. This wasn't just about politics or protocols anymore. It was about survival, about finding a way forward when the lines between friend and foe had blurred into shades of gray. Varak's gaze flicked between them, a flicker of calculation behind his molten eyes. Harrington's fists tightened, but there was a flicker doubt, or maybe just a sliver of understanding. In the heart of the temple, surrounded by enemies and allies, Alex and Lethia stood side by side. They had no map, no clear path, just each other against the shifting tides of a galaxy on the edge. "It's mutual," Alex asserted, his voice firm but controlled. "And it's more than that. I am immune to everything she's got." His statement hung heavy in the air, rippling through both delegations like a shock wave. Murmurs buzzed from the humans, distrust simmering just beneath the surface. Among the Aurelians, there was a mix of curiosity and skepticism, predatory glances evaluating the implications of his words. Commander Harrington's scowl deepened, a muscle in his jaw twitching. "You're a biohazard waiting to happen, RHS. An unpredictable variable we can't afford." Alex's eyes met the commander's, the weight of the accusation stinging. Just months ago, he had been one of them, an unquestioning soldier in the UEDF's ranks. Now he was an anomaly, a threat. Varak's molten eyes studied Alex with a different intensity, a calculating, thoughtful gaze. The Aurelian leader's tail twitched, a subtle but telling sign. "This, immunity," Varak spoke slowly, his voice a low rumble. "Is it a result of chance, or something engineered?" Alex's heart pounded, but his expression remained steady. The truth was about to spill out, no more hiding behind orders or protocols. "I've cracked a door open," Alex pressed, his voice edging toward urgency. "We can understand each other, work together. We don't have to keep repeating the same mistakes, the same violence." Varak leaned forward, curiosity sharpening his reptilian features. "Explain this immunity," he demanded. Alex drew a steadying breath, the air of the temple heavy with expectation. "It's not luck. It's science. Confusion flickered across the faces of the humans, suspicion deepening. The Aurelians, though wary, seemed more intrigued, perhaps recognizing the echoes of their own bioengineering history. Harrington crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing. Science. We didn't authorize any of this. You're not some lab rat we tossed into the field, RHS. No, Alex admitted, his gaze unwavering. You didn't. But someone else did. Post-Europa. When the rest of the squad didn't make it back. Lethia shifted beside him, her presence steadying. Her eyes met his, a quiet assurance that whatever storm he was about to unleash, they'd face it together. After Europa, Alex began, his voice clear but weighted with memory, I was barely alive. The UEDF had written me off. But a division off the books picked me up. Experimental gene mods. Alien tech spliced into me. Gasps rippled through the chamber, sharp and startled. Even Varak's controlled facade cracked for a moment, surprise flickering across his face. The Aurelians exchanged quick, meaningful glances, lines of communication unspoken but understood. Lethia stepped closer to Alex, a fierce, protective light in her gaze. He's proof we can coexist, she said firmly. Proof that our biology can merge, adapt without destruction. Alex nodded, his heartbeat hammering. We're not enemies by nature. We can choose different. For a moment, there was only silence, a fragile pause where everything hung in the balance. Then, Varak's voice broke through, steady and calculating. You suggest an alliance, he said. It wasn't a question, it was a challenge. Alex glanced at Lethia. They had already made their choice against the odds, against the rules. Now it was time to see if this fractured, divided assembly could do the same. Harrington's laugh was sharp and biting, a sound edged with cynicism. Peace? With them? Naive. We buried too many of our own to start holding hands now. Varak's reptilian eyes narrowed, his scaled brow furrowing. Every strike was defense. You encroached. You provoked. We retaliated. Alex's patience thinned. He stepped between the two leaders, his voice firm. Enough. Look at us. We're circling the same arguments, fighting the same fights. Break the cycle. There's more compatibility out there, we just have to find it. The words hung in the charged air, a challenge and a plea all at once. The gathered delegates shifted, their faces a patchwork of doubt, curiosity, and suspicion. Harrington's gaze hardened, years of loss and betrayal visible in the lines of his face. Varak's tail flicked, the gesture both irritated and contemplative. The room teetered on a delicate edge, one word could tip it toward chaos or cooperation. A tense silence settled, thick enough to smother any dissent. Eyes darted between Alex, Harrington, and Varak, as if waiting for someone to ignite the powder keg. Finally, Varak's voice sliced through the stillness, measured but sharp. Prove this immunity. Alex met his gaze, unwavering. I will under joint oversight. Aurelians, humans. Both. Harrington's jaw clenched, a flicker of indignation tightening his expression. Out of the question. You think I'll let our tech be dissected by them? Do you think we would risk the same? Varak countered smoothly. This could be the key, a step beyond war, beyond loss. The room held its breath, caught between the old wounds of violence and the fragile hope of understanding. Harrington's fingers drummed on his crossed arms, frustration radiating off him. Yet the seed was there, fragile but undeniable. I've got the right to chase this, Alex snapped, the frustration cracking through his voice. I didn't choose to be turned into some experiment, but I can choose what I do with it. And right now, that means finding answers that could mean something to both sides. Lethia's voice cut through the air, clear and unyielding. What we have, it's beyond flesh, beyond biology. He is my mate. The declaration hit like a thunderclap. Faces turned, shocked. The weight of her words was undeniable, a binding claim among her people, a bond that could not be easily dismissed. Varak's eyes widened slightly, recognition flickering across his face. Harrington's expression darkened, a storm of betrayal and disbelief crossing his features. The idea that his soldier, his weapon, had crossed a line this absolute was a betrayal of everything he thought he controlled. "This is reckless," Harrington growled, his voice a low rumble. "Do you have any idea what you're doing, RHS? What this means?" Alex glanced at Lethia, their bond unspoken yet powerful. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know exactly what it means." The room trembled with tension, an unsteady balance between tradition and the terrifying, exhilarating unknown. Would they choose to step forward into the future or remain chained to the conflicts of the past? "Test him," Varak declared, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Controlled conditions, neutral oversight." Harrington's eyes blazed. This is insanity, handing over a UEDF soldier to them. The disbelief in his voice bordered on contempt. Varak's smirk was sharp, confident. "You'll lose more than a soldier if you walk away. You'll lose the only chance we have to understand what could be a bridge between us." The air was charged, a knife's edge between ambition and fear. Alex could feel the eyes on him, human and Aurelian alike, judging, measuring, calculating. Science against suspicion. Possibility against pride. Harrington's stare hardened, the battle between protocol and progress warring in his gaze. Alex held his breath. A single decision here could define everything, whether this moment became a first step or a final severance. The silence stretched, brittle and taut. Finally, Harrington's shoulders sank, his voice a reluctant growl. "Fine. But under our conditions. Lieutenant Donovan will observe. Daily reports, full veto power if this goes sideways." Varak's lips curved, a slow, satisfied nod. "Agreed. Our scientists, your oversight. Mutual accountability." The agreement landed heavy, a fragile truce stitched together by desperate necessity. Both sides knew the risks: sabotage, betrayal, unintended consequences. Yet there was also a glimmer of potential, a chance to unearth something beyond the conflict. Alex and Lethia exchanged a glance, an unspoken acknowledgement of the stakes, the gravity of what they just set in motion. The room slowly dispersed, wary eyes lingering before turning away. As the last of the delegates departed, Alex felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. The lines had been crossed, blurred beyond repair. This wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a gamble that could redefine their worlds or destroy them. Back in the quiet of their room, the echo of negotiations still thundering in his mind, Alex pulled Lethia close. The space between them felt charged, alive with all that had just transpired. "We're rewriting everything, aren't we?" he murmured, the disbelief and exhilaration evident in his voice. Lethia's gaze softened, a gentle fire glimmering behind her eyes. "I can't imagine this without you. We're the first to see beyond what we're supposed to be." The weight of her words pressed against the walls, against the reality they both knew. Pioneers, rebels, a contradiction in every sense. They had dared to breach the boundaries between enemy and ally, human and alien. Alex's hand found hers, fingers entwining. "No matter what happens, We face it together. Her grip tightened, fierce and unyielding. Together. Whatever they had begun, it could not be undone. The path ahead was uncharted, uncertain and treacherous, but it was theirs. An unstoppable journey set in motion by an impossible bond. "I'm all in," Alex said, his voice steady and unwavering. "Whatever's next, we face it together." Lethia's eyes searched his, an unspoken depth passing between them. Trust was a currency more valuable than any weapon, more volatile than any conflict. Her nod was more than agreement, it was a promise. Outside their small sanctuary, the delegations began to disperse. Humans and Aurelians, two factions caught in a cycle of mistrust, now confronted a choice that could shatter the old order. The dawn of a new chapter loomed, fragile yet resilient, waiting to be written. Alex knew it wouldn't be easy. They would face resistance, doubt, betrayal, forces far beyond themselves. But for the first time, the fight felt purposeful. Not a battle against, but a fight for understanding. For possibility. For each other. The neutral research facility loomed on the horizon, a stark, sterile dome at the outskirts of Karos. Its walls gleamed under the city's neon glow, a bastion of curiosity nestled in the shadow of conflict. Alex's gaze traced the structure, his mind spinning. What started as a recon mission had morphed into a galactic turning point. He had expected to map enemy defenses, not navigate the gray space between alien and ally. He'd stumbled into history, or maybe, just maybe, he had made it. A guard checked their clearance, his face unreadable beneath a visor. Alex glanced at Lethia, her expression steeled yet calm. The weight of this experiment pressed against them both, the scrutiny of humans and Aurelians, the lingering distrust waiting for a crack. "Last chance to back out," Lethia teased softly, though her eyes were sharp. Alex smirked, the edge of his nerves breaking. "Too late. I'm already a science experiment." They stepped inside, the doors sealing behind them with a clinical hiss. A new frontier waited beyond, an arena where their survival would be dissected, analyzed, questioned. Yet amidst the uncertainty, they had each other, a partnership uncharted but undeniable. Standing in the quiet of their assigned quarters, Alex reached for Lethia's hand. Her claws rested cool against his skin, a reminder of the moment that had altered their fates. Surviving her venom had been more than luck, it had been a fracture in the universe, a break in the predictable. "We blurred the lines," he said softly. "Species, enemies, lovers, it turns out they're not as fixed as everyone thinks." Lethia's grip tightened, her gaze steady and sure. "We've got hope now. A future." Her words settled between them, not a lofty ideal but a grounded truth. The path would be messy, marred by skepticism and sabotage. Yet the possibility of something greater, something better, flickered at the edges. Together, they would face it. Defiant, unyielding, a force that no council, no army, no legacy of division could fully dismantle. Their story was no longer just survival. It was a rebellion against limitations, against the fear of the unknown. A rebellion of hope, scarred but unstoppable.